What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Mass Effect 3 multiplayer class guide. In this episode, we take a look at one of the most dedicated support classes in the game, the Volus Mercenary. Though he lacks in damage output, he is a class that can support any team. Now, as with all my classes, I spec the Volus Mercenary for the harder difficulties in the game. I start out by maxing out Decoy. I start by putting points into exploding Decoy over shields and duration. This is because I will be using a light loadout on this character in order to get the most out of shield boost, and with a light loadout means I can recast Decoy more often, making shields and durations less of a necessity. Also, explosive Decoy gives a little bit of extra damage output for the Volus Mercenary. Next, I put points into shock over recharge speed. Shock gives a little extra damage output, and again, due to the light loadout, recharge speed is not much of an issue. Lastly, I put points into durability over duration. Durability means that the Decoy can take a little bit of extra damage before dying. Next is combat drone. I max out this ability, putting points into chain lightning over rockets. Rockets helps great at long distances, but I like my combat drone to get up close, making chain lightning a more viable option at close distances. Next, I put points into shock over shields and damage. Shock gives your combat drone a crowd control aspect, as it can stun opponents up close. Damage and shields are also a good option though if you prefer to take rockets, but I prefer shock. Lastly, I put points into detonate over shields and damage again. This is because due to the light loadout, I can get my combat drone up close and personal with opponents, shock them, chain lightning them, and as it is close to opponents, it's likely to take damage and die, and then it will explode thanks to detonate, dealing more damage. And thanks to the light loadout, means that I can easily renew the combat drone and send it out again. Next, I max out shield boost, the great healing Volus ability. I spec this like my other Volus classes, maxing it out, putting points into protection over duration. I simply prefer the damage protection that protection gives over the duration of the shield duration. The direct shields restored from shield boost overrides duration in my opinion. Next, I put points into recharge speed over regeneration. Again, this is because I like my shields to be restored in big chunks rather than over time. And lastly, I put points into shields over impact radius in order to restore large amounts of shields at a time. As for the passive abilities, these are down to personal preference. With Volus training, I go up to rank 4 damage and capacity. I would normally go with weapon damage, as this is really the only major source of damage for the Volus Mercenary, but I also wanted to take advantage of using heavier weaponry, so went for damage and capacity in order to get the capacity bonus. Also, I would normally go up to rank 5 shield boost to increase the healing of shield boost, but instead went for putting points up to rank 4 in the fitness tree. This was really a personal choice, as I really didn't want to go into a match with such small amounts of health and shields. It might not be the best option, but it worked well for me. As for weaponry, you need to choose something good, but something light. I went for my favourite N7 Hurricane. The weapon you choose is really going to be the major source of damage for the Volus Mercenary. Combat drone will do a little and decoy minimal, so you need something so you'll become less of a liability on the damage output side of things. As for gear slot, take something either to increase your weapon damage or failing that, something to increase your survivability. Anyway, let's get into the heart of the episode and talk about the Volus Mercenary's moves and abilities. Now, unlike other Sentinels in the game, the Volus Mercenary is one of the rare Sentinels that does not get tech armor. Instead though, his first ability is Decoy. For this ability, the Volus Mercenary will spawn a hologrammatic replica of himself to distract enemies. The Decoy will have its own health and own shields, and will stay active for a set amount of time or until it's destroyed by opponents. When spawning the Decoy, it will always appear a few feet in front of the Volus Mercenary, so keep this in mind when you're deploying the Decoy in order to get it into the best possible position. Decoy's main use is to distract opponents and draw fire away from you and your teammates. However, it will not fool everyone. Melee-based opponents will completely ignore the Decoy, meaning that some factions, like for example the Reapers, make Decoy less effective. Banshees, Brutes, Husks will all ignore the Decoy and head straight for you and your team instead. A Decoy set up in a choke point is a good tactic, as it draws in opponents to possible killing fields. If your team can set up a Decoy and work together, you can easily dispatch opponents. Normally, Decoy is primarily used as a defensive ability, but can be augmented to deal small amounts of damage, which helps the Volus Mercenary in his lacking offensive department. The last point to be aware of is that Decoy is not invincible, and even if it does die from damage, it will despawn after a while, so be ready to set up a new one when needed. Also be aware that if the enemy do see you set up the Decoy, they can ignore it as they saw you set it up and thus focus on you instead. The next ability available to the Volus Mercenary is Combat Drone. With this ability, the Volus Mercenary will deploy a floating combat drone that will attack and stun opponents. On top of this, it will draw enemy fire. However, this will not be to the extent that Decoy can draw fire. The combat drone can be changed in various ways to attack in different manners depending on how you spec it. The build I have gone with is to focus the combat drone on close combat, so it needs to get close to opponents to deal damage. If you wanted it to attack from afar, then I would advise rockets on your drones, but I feel that you can get more benefit out of the drone by speccing it the way I have. With chain lightning, shock and detonate, you can get your drone up close, dishing out damage and then exploding for more additional damage once it dies. Shock adds some very nice crowd control to the combat drone, as it will stun weaker opponents for a short period, giving you time to breathe or relocate. This won't really work on boss type characters though, like Banshees and Atlases. Detonate is a nice aspect to combat drone, as long as you have a fairly quick cooldown timer. When the combat drone dies and detonates, it will dish out a nice bit of area of effect damage. This can also set off tech combos. You can then follow this off by deploying a fresh combat drone. However, if you do not have a quick loadout, then the rocket drone might be the better option. When casting the combat drone, it will appear wherever you cast it. So if you target, say, a Ravager, then the combat drone will spawn near the Ravager. However, it does not have an infinite range, and if cast at something that is too far away, then it will simply spawn next to you before floating off to the nearest target it can attack. One of the major downsides about the combat drone is that you have limited control over who the drone will attack, something which I don't like in my playstyle on the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. The last ability available to the Volus Mercenary is Shield Boost, the key ability available to the Volus race. This ability allows the Volus Mercenary to restore his and his teammates' shields, making him a potential healer. This is an ability that makes the Volus Mercenary very useful. The shield boost will provide you and your team with a good chunk of shields restored and leave a heal over time effect too. This heal over time effect will restore small portions of your shields for a short period of time. Add to this the fact that you can spec your shield boost to provide some damage protection means that you can have a very good survivability tool for you and your team. The range of shield boost is not massive, but as long as you and your team stick close to each other, you shouldn't need to worry too much about your shield boost missing. Shield boost benefits greatly from a light loadout, so you can cast the ability as often as possible. This way you can keep up the damage protection on you and your teammates. You can go so far as to even spam the ability to give you and your team a form of invincibility. However, doing this means that you have to sacrifice your damage output. Shield Boost really does shine when it comes to objective missions. When your team does get spread out though, Shield Boost becomes less valuable for the team, but it's still handy for keeping you alive, and being a Volus with shields like wrapping paper, you will need it. As for the passives, like I said many times, these are down to personal preference. With Volus training, I would normally go up to rank 5 to get the extra boost to my shield boost. But in this case, I went for the extra health and shields in rank 4 of the fitness tree. This was because of selfish reasons, and I wanted to give my Volus Mercenary some extra basic health and shields. Personally, there are many ways to spec the Volus Mercenary. You can skip out Decoy altogether, as how useful it is dictated by which faction you're playing against. By taking the points out of Decoy, you can instead max out Volus training and go for some extra weapon damage or weight reduction. Also, you'll be able to max out fitness and max out your health and shields. As for weaponry, you have to take a strong weapon that's not too heavy. With a heavy loadout, you will not be able to take advantage of the shield boost heal as often. You also have to remember that your weaponry is your main source of damage with the Volus Mercenary, as he is the only class that lacks any direct offensive abilities. Now, the Volus as a race are very unique, very different from the other races available in the multiplayer. They are very weak in terms of shields and health. They really cannot take any hits at all. This is even worse on this character, as I have not maxed out his health and shields. The Volus are about half the size of a human. This means that they cannot take cover in the same way as the other races in the game. However, they can simply walk up to cover and use it as a sort of soft cover style. They have the basic dodge mechanics where they can roll out of the way of incoming fire. It's not the fastest dodge, but it's not the worst. Lastly, their melee is very unique and very useful. Firstly, their light melee allows them to cloak, very similar to tactical cloak. This will last about 3 or 4 seconds and gives the Volus Mercenary a great escape mechanic. It can also be used for sneak attacks too, but it's not advisable. This works well when trying to set up new decoys without being seen. Also, I should add that unlike the Infiltrator's tactical cloak, if you attack whilst you're cloaked as the Volus Mercenary, the cloak will not break. Finally, there is the heavy melee. The Volus Mercenary will encase himself in a large bubble of sorts that will provide damage protection and slowly restore his shields. This, however, should not be counted on when faced with tough opponents. Overall, the Volus Mercenary is a very support-based character. It really shines in teams that work well together. Teams that like defensive positions, who move together, who want a dedicated healer and support character in their team, will stand to gain a lot out of a Volus Mercenary in their team. However, for me, I am not a fan of this class. The sheer lack of any direct offensive ability really did put me off the class. I felt sort of useless, even when I know my role as this class is to support the team. I personally much preferred the other Volus classes in the game, even though they provide similar roles to the Volus Mercenary. That being said, if you are with a good group of friends, chatting and communicating, and you don't mind the lack of any direct damage abilities, then you cannot go wrong with the Volus Mercenary. Anyway, I've been Darcblade, bringing you my Mass Effect 3 multiplayer class guide to the Volus Mercenary. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like for more.